Imagine an army that never fired a single bullet, yet won battles, saved lives, and altered the course of World War II. Imagine painters, sculptors, theater set designers, and sound engineers stepping onto a battlefield not to fight with guns, but with creativity, deception, and sheer audacity. These were the men of the Ghost Army, a secret U.S. military unit whose existence was classified for decades. They fooled the Nazis into believing massive armies were advancing, while the real Allied forces maneuvered safely. Today, we peel back the veil of secrecy to reveal how art, illusion, and strategy intertwined to create one of the most extraordinary stories of the Second World War. Introduction. During the darkest days of World War II, the Allied forces faced immense challenges. Battles were fought not just with firepower, but with brains, cunning, and psychological warfare. While generals planned strategies, a small, unusual American unit prepared for war in a completely different way. They weren't armed with tanks, rifles, or artillery. Instead, they carried paintbrushes, inflatable tanks, loudspeakers, and radios. Their mission? To mislead the enemy, save lives, and alter the course of battles, all without ever firing a shot. This was the Ghost Army, officially known as the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. Deception was their weapon, creativity was their ammunition, courage was their uniform. The formation of the Ghost Army. In 1944, as Allied forces prepared for the invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe, a bold idea took shape in Washington, D.C. The concept was simple in theory, but revolutionary in practice. Use art, design, and theatrical illusion to create a phantom army capable of tricking enemy forces into misjudging Allied strength and location. The Ghost Army was recruited from a most unexpected pool: the ranks of America's art schools, advertising agencies, and theaters. Men who painted murals, sculpted statues, designed costumes, or produced stage plays suddenly found themselves on a battlefield. One officer recalled later, "We were all artists, actors, and musicians. Nobody thought of us as soldiers, yet we were handed maps, briefings, and orders to deceive the Nazis. It was like being asked to stage the greatest production of our lives, but with real lives at stake." The unit consisted of approximately 1,100 men, a mix of young artists, designers, sound engineers, and military specialists. Many had never fired a weapon in their lives. Some had fought briefly and returned to civilian life. Others had narrowly avoided combat entirely due to medical conditions, but all shared one crucial skill: creativity. Their mission required brains over brawn, imagination over firepower. The training was as unusual as the mission itself. The men learned to inflate rubber tanks to look like massive armored divisions from a distance. They practiced creating fake radio transmissions that mimicked real army signals. And they mastered sound engineering techniques, broadcasting recordings of tanks, troops marching, and artillery fire across the countryside to fool German intelligence. Their base in Asheville, North Carolina, resembled a bustling art studio more than a military camp. Mess halls served both food and inspiration. Workshops echoed with the clatter of tools, paintbrushes, and hammers. Each man contributed a unique skill. A painter might design realistic camouflage for a decoy tank. A sound engineer could craft a 40-minute recording of a full division marching and then loop it endlessly. A set designer could build life-size dummy jeeps that would look convincing from enemy aerial reconnaissance. The unit's motto, though unofficial, captured the essence of their work: deception is an art. The recruitment and selection process. The Army searched across the United States for men with extraordinary artistic or technical talent. Advertisements were sent to art schools, design agencies, and theaters. Applicants were tested for creativity, technical skill, and quick thinking. They had to prove they could solve complex problems under pressure and improvise when necessary. Many recruits came from unexpected backgrounds. One sculptor who had worked on monuments in Washington, D.C., was tasked with creating inflatable tanks that could fool German reconnaissance planes. A Broadway set designer developed massive stage props that doubled as fake artillery and supply depots. Musicians were recruited to operate speakers that could broadcast the sounds of entire battalions. Physical ability was secondary to ingenuity. Many recruits were small, thin, or otherwise unsuited for traditional frontline combat. Yet in their hands, creativity became a weapon more powerful than any gun. Early training exercises. Once recruited, the men underwent intensive hands-on training. The exercises were equal parts military strategy and theatrical production. Recruits practiced inflating giant rubber tanks, perfecting the illusion from distances of hundreds of meters. They experimented with canvas tents, dummy vehicles, and fake gun positions to create the impression of entire divisions. Sound training was particularly vital. The unit carried enormous reel-to-reel tape machines, sometimes as large as small cars, that could play recorded sounds of tanks rolling over dirt, troops marching, or heavy artillery fire. They would position these machines in fields or behind ridges, broadcast the sounds, and observe whether German forces were deceived. It was a strange, surreal environment. Soldiers who had never wielded a weapon before now carried out missions that required precision, coordination, and most importantly, imagination. The psychological aspect. Beyond the technical skills, the Ghost Army trained in the art of psychological warfare. Their mission was to instill fear, uncertainty, and misdirection in enemy forces. Officers emphasized that every decoy, every broadcast, every fake camp was a form of theater, one in which the stakes were life and death. Men were briefed extensively on Nazi tactics, intelligence methods, and reconnaissance practices. They studied enemy movements and habits so thoroughly that they could anticipate how the Germans would react to specific illusions. The ultimate goal was not just to appear real, but to manipulate enemy perception, forcing the Nazis to make critical mistakes. It was unlike any other unit in history. The Ghost Army combined artistry, theater, and military strategy into a single force, and soon they would be deployed across the battlefields of Europe, where their talents would save thousands of lives and play a crucial role in the Allied victory.
When the Ghost Army reached Europe, their mission became real. Unlike conventional soldiers who relied on guns, tanks, and ammunition, these men relied entirely on deception, illusion, and psychological warfare. The creative tactics they employed were groundbreaking, blending artistry, engineering, and technical innovation to fool the enemy. Inflatable tanks and dummy equipment. One of their most famous techniques involved inflatable tanks, jeeps, and artillery pieces. From a distance, these massive decoys looked like real armored divisions ready for battle. Painted and weathered with meticulous detail, they fooled enemy reconnaissance planes, scouts, and even ground patrols. The decoys were made from rubberized canvas, filled with air, and carefully rigged to resemble operational vehicles. Soldiers would spend hours adding details like painted camouflage, fake gun barrels, and dummy treads. Some decoys even featured small engines to mimic movement. Lieutenant Tony Levere, who later became a test pilot, remembered, "From the air, it was convincing. You could see shadows, shapes, even the glint of sunlight on the rubber. If the Germans had flown over without knowing it was a trick, they would have sworn it was a full division." Fake radio transmissions. Another innovative tactic was the use of fake radio transmissions. The Ghost Army employed skilled radio operators to simulate real troop movements. They would broadcast carefully crafted messages, mimicking the encrypted communications of full army divisions.
German intelligence relied heavily on intercepting radio signals to determine Allied troop locations. By transmitting realistic yet entirely fictional messages, the Ghost Army manipulated enemy perceptions. This tactic forced German commanders to redeploy forces unnecessarily, often away from the actual front lines. Sound effects and sonic illusions. The Ghost Army also mastered sonic deception. Large reel-to-reel tape machines, sometimes weighing hundreds of pounds, were deployed to play recorded sounds of tanks rolling, soldiers marching, and artillery firing. These sounds could travel miles across open terrain. At times, engineers synchronized multiple machines to create the illusion of entire corps moving. One memorable operation involved broadcasting the sounds of a full armored division advancing toward a German-held village. From miles away, the Germans believed they faced overwhelming forces and abandoned strategic positions without firing a shot. Camouflage and visual deception. Camouflage played a critical role. Soldiers painted decoys to match the surrounding terrain and built false structures like tents, ammunition depots, and command posts. From aerial photographs, these illusions appeared indistinguishable from real installations. The Ghost Army's artists even used perspective tricks to enhance realism. By positioning decoys at varying distances and angles, they could simulate depth and scale. A single fake tank might appear as part of an entire battalion when viewed from the air. First field deployments. The first major operations took place in the months leading up to D-Day, June 6, 1944. The Ghost Army was tasked with diverting German attention from actual invasion points. Using a combination of decoys, sound, and fake transmissions, they created the impression that the Allies were massing forces elsewhere. In one operation near the Normandy coast, the Ghost Army's tactics caused German commanders to move several divisions away from the beaches where the actual landings occurred. These subtle but critical maneuvers likely saved thousands of lives and contributed directly to the success of Operation Overlord. Psychological effect on the enemy. The psychological effect on German forces was profound. Soldiers reported seeing enormous armored divisions that disappeared when approached. Others claimed to hear the relentless advance of troops where no one was present. Fear, confusion, and miscalculation became Allied weapons in themselves. Captain DeWitt Jones later described a mission. "We set up our tanks and speakers at dusk. By morning, the enemy had withdrawn from positions they considered vital. They never realized they were being fooled by a handful of artists and engineers." Innovation under pressure. The Ghost Army's creativity wasn't just for show. Every operation required improvisation under intense pressure. Inflatable tanks could be punctured by wind or bullets, tape machines could fail, and decoys sometimes needed rapid repairs. Soldiers learned to adapt quickly, blending technical skill with artistic flair to maintain the illusion. By the end of 1944, the Ghost Army had executed dozens of operations across France, Belgium, and Germany, consistently misleading enemy forces. Their work was a testament to ingenuity, courage, and the power of art as a strategic weapon. By late 1944, the Ghost Army was no longer just training and testing tactics. They were operating in the heart of Europe, often dangerously close to German lines. Unlike conventional units, which relied on numbers and firepower, the Ghost Army relied on cunning, precision, and nerves of steel. Each mission was high stakes. A single mistake could expose the deception and place both the artists and entire Allied operations in jeopardy. The Normandy deception. One of their earliest and most critical missions took place shortly after D-Day. The Ghost Army was tasked with creating the illusion of multiple divisions moving to reinforce positions far from the actual landing beaches. Inflatable tanks, dummy artillery, and full-scale fake camps were deployed across the French countryside. Soldiers watched from hills as German reconnaissance planes flew overhead, photographing what appeared to be a massive buildup of Allied forces. Meanwhile, the real Allied divisions advanced unopposed. The Ghost Army's creative decoys drew enemy attention away from the beaches, and reports later revealed that German commanders had delayed counterattacks, believing the feints were real. Private First Class Jack Day, a painter turned soldier, recalled, "We were setting up tents and inflatables at night. At dawn, I watched a German plane fly over, probably thinking it had spotted a division of 20,000 men. In reality, there were maybe a few hundred of us, and most of it was just canvas and rubber." The Battle of Metz. The Ghost Army's involvement in the Battle of Metz demonstrated the life-saving potential of deception. In this operation, the unit was tasked with simulating reinforcements approaching the city. Using sound recordings of tanks and artillery, along with visible dummy vehicles, they created the illusion of overwhelming Allied strength. German defenders, believing they were about to face massive reinforcements, abandoned several strategic positions without a fight. Reports indicated that the Ghost Army's illusions caused the Germans to divert artillery and infantry, effectively reducing casualties among the real Allied troops and accelerating the capture of Metz. Behind enemy lines, risk and reward. Operating near enemy lines was fraught with danger. Unlike conventional troops, the Ghost Army had minimal weaponry. Most soldiers carried only sidearms, relying on speed, stealth, and the effectiveness of their illusions to stay safe. In Belgium, the unit set up a fake camp near the Sauer River, simulating a division poised to cross into German territory. German scouts observed the fake positions and reported them up the chain of command. By the time the Germans realized they had been duped, Allied infantry had already crossed the river safely elsewhere, advancing with far less resistance. Sergeant Bill Blass, a sound engineer, later recounted a close call. "We had a machine playing the sounds of 500 tanks moving all night. At one point, a German patrol came within 200 yards. If they had approached any closer, it could have ended badly for us. We stayed perfectly still, and they moved on, convinced the army was elsewhere." Notable individual heroics. While the Ghost Army functioned as a unit, individual acts of courage were numerous. Corporal Robert Shepard, a young artist from New York, improvised a method to repair a punctured inflatable tank in the middle of a mission, preventing the enemy from discovering the ruse. Lieutenant Douglas Black, a set designer, coordinated the rapid relocation of a fake artillery battery under heavy observation, ensuring the Germans never suspected the deception. Each small act of ingenuity contributed to the overall success of the operation. The art of misdirection. The Ghost Army's missions weren't merely tactical, they were psychological operations at their finest. By constantly relocating decoys, broadcasting varying sounds, and creating multiple layers of deception, they made German intelligence second-guess everything they saw. German commanders were forced to spread their forces thin, often moving entire divisions to respond to phantom threats. This misallocation of resources directly aided major Allied offensives, demonstrating the strategic power of the Ghost Army. Personal stories and emotional toll. Life in the Ghost Army was demanding and stressful. Soldiers lived in constant uncertainty, always knowing that discovery could be fatal. Yet camaraderie and a shared sense of purpose fueled their determination. Many soldiers kept diaries, detailing not only the missions, but the emotions involved. A young painter wrote, "I've never felt more alive and more terrified. Every brushstroke, every sound we play could save lives or get us killed. It's unlike anything I've ever done." Despite the danger, morale was high. The knowledge that their work saved thousands of lives added meaning to their surreal missions. Soldiers found comfort in humor, creativity, and the knowledge that even in war, art could be a weapon. supporting major Allied victories. By the end of 1944, the Ghost Army had participated in operations that directly influenced the outcomes of key battles, including the liberation of French towns, the advancement through Belgium, and the eventual push into Germany. Each mission was meticulously planned, often weeks in advance, and executed with precision. From fake troop movements to auditory illusions, the unit's actions forced the enemy to miscalculate, retreat, or hesitate, giving Allied forces decisive advantages. By early 1945, the Ghost Army had become a pivotal, though secretive, force in Europe. They were constantly on the move, setting up decoy positions days ahead of actual troop movements. Every mission required careful coordination and impeccable timing because one misstep could compromise entire offensives. The Phantom Divisions. The Ghost Army often simulated entire divisions with only a fraction of the men physically present. For instance, a single battalion of 200 soldiers could appear as 5,000 troops thanks to inflatable tanks, dummy vehicles, and cleverly placed sound devices. These phantom divisions served a dual purpose. 1. Confuse German intelligence about the size and location of Allied forces. 2. Draw enemy forces away from actual attack points, reducing Allied casualties. Major General Harry Crandall, who observed one operation, later wrote, "I could not believe what I was seeing. It was an entire army, yet it didn't exist, and it worked." Advanced sound techniques. Sound deception became increasingly sophisticated. Engineers recorded everything from tank engines to marching troops and artillery fire, then played them on massive reel-to-reel machines. At night, they broadcast these sounds miles away, tricking the enemy into believing that divisions were advancing under cover of darkness. In one operation in the Ardennes, German forces reported an entire armored division moving through the forest, while in reality, only a few trucks and speakers had been deployed. These sonic illusions often bought precious hours for real Allied units, allowing them to secure strategic positions with minimal resistance. Risky reconnaissance and setup. Setting up decoys often required soldiers to operate dangerously close to enemy lines. Scouts would move into contested areas to position inflatable tanks, radio sets, and dummy artillery. These soldiers had to remain completely silent, camouflage perfectly, and react instantly if discovered. Sergeant Thomas Miller, a sound engineer, recounted a near disaster. "We were placing speakers just 300 meters from a German outpost. One soldier tripped over a wire and we all froze, but they never saw us. That night, our phantom army caused them to retreat from the entire sector." Creative camouflage. Camouflage wasn't limited to decoys. Soldiers painted themselves, vehicles, and terrain to blend seamlessly with the surroundings. Large canvas tarps mimicked shadows, painted mud replicated tank treads, and dummy artillery was positioned as if ready to fire. Artists used perspective to amplify realism. A single inflatable tank, viewed from above at the right angle, could appear as part of a massive armored column. Such meticulous attention to detail amazed even seasoned military observers. Personal stories of courage. Many soldiers formed lasting friendships under extreme circumstances. Corporal David Lee, a sculptor, described how his team spent 12 hours assembling a fake artillery position under shell fire. "We laughed, painted, and even sang while setting it up. Somehow it kept fear at bay and made the impossible feel doable." Private James Owens, a sound technician, recalled, "At night, we played recordings of an advancing army to scare the enemy. I remember lying under a tree, listening to my own voice echoing across the forest, and feeling a strange mix of fear and pride. We were winning battles without firing a single shot." Key operations, Belgium and Germany. In Belgium, during the Battle of the Bulge, the Ghost Army played a critical role. The unit simulated large troop movements to mislead German forces who were desperate to regain lost ground. Decoys, sound broadcasts, and fake radio messages diverted the enemy, allowing real Allied units to launch counterattacks effectively. As the Allies pushed into Germany, the Ghost Army continued operations. Near the Rhineland, dummy vehicles were arranged along riverbanks, while tape machines simulated thousands of troops marching through the countryside. The Germans, believing they faced overwhelming forces, often withdrew rather than engage. The emotional toll. Despite the outward excitement of these missions, the emotional toll was significant. Soldiers were constantly exposed to danger without the traditional tools of defense. Mistakes could be fatal, yet the pressure also fostered ingenuity and resilience. Diaries and letters reveal moments of fear, doubt, and triumph. One soldier wrote, "We're artists at war. Each brushstroke, each sound, each inflatable tank is a weapon. If it works, men live. If it fails, we die. There is no middle ground." Lessons learned on the front. By this stage of the war, the Ghost Army had honed their methods into an unparalleled force multiplier. Their tactics taught invaluable lessons. Creativity could serve as a battlefield weapon. Psychological warfare was as effective as physical combat. And even small groups, if clever and coordinated, could influence large-scale operations. The Ghost Army's work remained top secret, so public recognition was absent. Yet their impact on the European theater was undeniable, often turning potentially costly engagements into strategic victories with minimal casualties. By the end of World War II, the Ghost Army had completed more than 20 major deception operations, misdirecting enemy forces across France, Belgium, and Germany. Despite being unarmed for traditional combat, their ingenuity saved thousands of lives and contributed to the success of crucial Allied offensives. Shortening campaigns and saving lives. Every mission conducted by the Ghost Army had a tangible impact. By deceiving German commanders about troop locations and strength, they caused misallocation of enemy forces, forced retreats, and reduced casualties among frontline soldiers. One historian noted, the Ghost Army allowed real divisions to advance with far less resistance. Their deceptions shortened campaigns that might have taken weeks longer and cost exponentially more lives. For instance, during operations in the Ardennes and near Metz, German forces were misled to believe they faced overwhelming divisions. They withdrew from fortified positions, enabling Allied units to secure objectives more efficiently. Analysts estimate that the Ghost Army prevented thousands of deaths, both civilian and military. Maintaining secrecy. Part of the Ghost Army's historical significance lies in the fact that their work remained classified for decades. Even after the war ended in 1945, the stories of these artists-turned-soldiers were kept secret under military orders. Soldiers who had served in the Ghost Army could not openly discuss their missions. Recognition, awards, and acknowledgement were delayed for decades, which contributed to the mystique surrounding their operations. Many veterans lived with the quiet pride of knowing they had changed the course of history without public acclaim. Lieutenant DeWitt Jones reflected years later, "We were a strange unit. Nobody outside knew we existed. And maybe that was the point. Our work succeeded because it was invisible." Recognition after the war. It wasn't until the 1990s that the Ghost Army received formal acknowledgement. Veterans' accounts, declassified documents, and scholarly research revealed the unit's vital contributions. In 1996, the Ghost Army Legacy Project was established to preserve and honor their story, ensuring that the combination of artistry, courage, and strategy would not be forgotten. The unit's legacy influenced both military tactics and psychological operations. Modern deception techniques, including the use of decoys, misinformation, and multimedia, trace conceptual roots back to the Ghost Army. Their work is studied in military academies, strategic studies, and even creative design courses. Cultural and historical influence. Beyond military history, the Ghost Army has inspired books, documentaries, and museum exhibits. Their story bridges war and art, demonstrating that creativity can be as decisive as conventional weapons. Art historian Sarah Milner remarked, "The Ghost Army proves that imagination can become a strategic asset. It challenges our assumptions of warfare, showing that innovation and human ingenuity can change outcomes just as much as firepower." Emotional legacy. Perhaps the most enduring impact is emotional. Soldiers of the Ghost Army returned home with unique stories of fear, humor, collaboration, and triumph. They had faced danger not with rifles, but with paintbrushes, soundboards, and decoys. Veteran Thomas Alexander wrote, "We didn't fire a shot, yet we were at the heart of the fight. Every inflatable tank, every broadcast, every carefully painted decoy was a lifeline for our comrades. That's a war story worth telling." The Ghost Army's legacy reminds us that courage takes many forms, and heroism is not always measured in bullets fired or battles won. It is often measured in creativity, daring, and the willingness to do the unimaginable.
Beyond strategies and decoys, the Ghost Army's story is deeply human. Each soldier brought a unique background, skill, and perspective to a unit unlike any other in military history. Many were artists, designers, and engineers whose skills would have seemed irrelevant on a traditional battlefield, yet their creativity became a weapon more potent than artillery. Sergeant Bill Blass, the sound engineer. Sergeant Bill Blass, a sound engineer from Chicago, was tasked with designing realistic battlefield sounds. Using reel-to-reel tape machines, he recorded tank engines, marching troops, and artillery fire. During one mission, he synchronized recordings from multiple machines to simulate a division advancing through a valley. Blass later recalled, "We had to think like composers. Each sound had to layer perfectly with the others. If we made a mistake, the enemy might discover the ruse. It was high pressure, but exhilarating." His work saved lives by convincing German commanders that a massive armored division was in place, diverting attention from real troop movements. Corporal Robert Shepard, the sculptor. Corporal Robert Shepard, a young sculptor, was instrumental in crafting inflatable tanks and artillery. When one tank was punctured by a stray bullet, Shepard improvised repairs in the field, ensuring the illusion remained convincing. He later wrote, "I realized that my art wasn't just decoration, it was life-saving. Every brushstroke, every repair could change the course of a battle. I never felt the weight of responsibility so intensely before." Lieutenant Douglas Black, the set designer. Lieutenant Douglas Black, previously a Broadway set designer, orchestrated complex camouflage operations. He arranged tents, dummy artillery, and decoys in ways that maximized realism from multiple vantage points. Black recounted a particularly tense moment. "We were setting up a fake artillery battery under observation by German scouts. One misstep could have exposed everything. We had to move with precision, like actors on a stage. The difference was that the audience could kill us if they realized the trick." Emotional challenges. Life in the Ghost Army was exhilarating but psychologically taxing. Soldiers faced constant danger, yet were largely unarmed. They relied on their wits, teamwork, and ingenuity to survive. Letters and diaries reveal moments of fear, humor, and camaraderie. Soldiers laughed while assembling decoys at night to mask fear. Some wrote poetry describing surreal experiences of battles that didn't exist. Others grappled with survivor's guilt, knowing their work saved lives indirectly without direct combat recognition. The art and engineering behind deception. The Ghost Army's success depended on technological and artistic innovation. Inflatable tanks required careful design to maintain shape and realism under varied weather conditions. Fake artillery had to cast accurate shadows and reflect sunlight convincingly. Sound engineers recorded environmental noise to layer with military sounds, creating the illusion of movement across terrain. Artists and engineers collaborated closely. For example, camouflage painters worked alongside sound engineers to ensure that visual and auditory illusions aligned perfectly. This multidisciplinary approach was revolutionary for its time and remains a case study in creative problem-solving under extreme conditions. Near-death experiences. Operating near enemy lines carried constant risk. Soldiers often worked within hundreds of meters of enemy positions, relying solely on stealth. Private James Owens recalled, "We were setting up speakers just 200 meters from an enemy patrol. If they had approached a few steps closer, our deception could have failed and we would have been captured or worse. Every heartbeat was tense, but we had to focus on perfection." Despite the danger, morale remained high. Soldiers took pride in their work, knowing that their creativity was literally saving lives and shaping history. Post-war reflections. After the war, many Ghost Army veterans returned to civilian life, carrying unique perspectives shaped by artistic heroism and wartime ingenuity. Sculptors, painters, and engineers applied lessons from the battlefield to their careers, often remarking that the Ghost Army experience changed the way they approached art, problem-solving, and collaboration. Thomas Alexander, a veteran, reflected decades later, "I didn't fire a gun in the war, yet I felt its weight daily. Art became a weapon, imagination a shield. I still carry the lessons of those days in every project I undertake." Legacy and recognition. For decades after World War II, the Ghost Army remained one of the most secretive units in U.S. military history. Their operations were classified, and soldiers were sworn to secrecy. Unlike traditional combat heroes, they received little public recognition. It wasn't until the 1990s that their story began to emerge through declassified documents, veterans' accounts, and historical research. The Ghost Army's tactics, once top secret, revealed a revolutionary approach to warfare, using creativity, deception, and psychological operations as strategic weapons. Declassified operations. Declassified documents revealed astonishing details. Inflatable tanks were used to simulate entire divisions. Fake artillery and supply depots misled German reconnaissance. Sound recordings of 1,000-plus troops marching created realistic illusions over miles of terrain. Radio transmissions mimicked real divisions' communications, fooling enemy intelligence. Historians emphasized that these operations were not minor distractions. They were strategically critical, saving countless lives and allowing Allied troops to advance efficiently. Modern military influence. The Ghost Army's work influenced post-war military strategy and psychological operations. Techniques such as decoy operations, fake radio traffic, and sonic deception inspired modern military tactics, including electronic warfare and signal jamming. Simulated troop deployments using inflatable vehicles or drones. Psychological operations in conflict zones to mislead or demoralize enemies. Military analysts describe the Ghost Army as a blueprint for unconventional warfare, demonstrating how intelligence, creativity, and perception can be leveraged alongside traditional forces. Museums and exhibitions. Today, the Ghost Army is honored in museums and exhibitions. The Ghost Army Legacy Project, established in 1996, preserves artifacts, stories, and artwork from the unit. Visitors can see inflatable tanks and decoy vehicles, original sound equipment used to broadcast phantom troop movements,
paintings and sketches created by soldiers during operations. These exhibits not only celebrate wartime ingenuity, but also highlight the human stories behind deception and strategy. Visitors often remark on the blend of artistry and heroism, demonstrating how creativity itself can change history. Veterans' reflections. Veterans of the Ghost Army have shared their experiences in interviews, books, and documentaries. Many reflect on the unique nature of their service. Captain DeWitt Jones: "We didn't fight in the conventional sense, yet we were on the front lines every day. Every illusion we created had the potential to save lives. That was our duty." Sergeant Bill Blass: "I realized that music, sound, and art were weapons in the right hands. War forced us to innovate, and our work made a difference." Lieutenant Douglas Black: "We were part artists, part soldiers. That duality defined everything we did, from the tiniest detail of a fake tank to the orchestration of a full-scale Phantom division." Educational impact. The Ghost Army has inspired studies in both military and civilian contexts. Military academies analyze their operations as case studies in deception and psychological warfare. Art and design schools examine the Ghost Army as an example of problem-solving and creative collaboration under extreme pressure. Historians highlight their role in shortening campaigns and reducing casualties during key battles in Europe. Cultural legacy. Books, documentaries, and even films have portrayed the Ghost Army, blending suspense, artistry, and historical significance. Their story resonates with audiences because it defies traditional notions of heroism. Courage was expressed not with bullets, but with paintbrushes, soundboards, and ingenuity. The Ghost Army reminds the world that history is not only shaped by force, but also by imagination. They proved that art and creativity can be as potent as military might when applied strategically. As the Allied forces pushed deeper into Germany in early 1945, the Ghost Army continued their operations with remarkable precision and bravery. Despite the war nearing its end, their missions remained perilous. The unit operated within enemy territory, constantly improvising illusions to mislead retreating German forces. The Rhine River operations. During the crossing of the Rhine River, the Ghost Army simulated a massive troop movement along the northern bank. Inflatable tanks, dummy artillery, and recorded sounds of an entire corps moving created the illusion of overwhelming force. The deception worked flawlessly. German commanders shifted divisions to counter this phantom threat, leaving the real crossing point less defended. Allied troops were able to cross safely, advancing into the heart of Germany. Sergeant Thomas Miller recalled, "We were exhausted, wet, and cold, yet every tape played, every tank positioned made a difference. Knowing our work directly saved lives gave us strength." Surreal experiences. Soldiers often describe the surreal nature of their missions. Inflatable tanks bouncing slightly in the wind, appearing menacing from a distance. Soundtracks of advancing armies echoing through empty forests at night. Camouflage decoys creating false intelligence reports that even enemy veterans found believable. Private James Owens noted, "We were fighting invisible battles. Sometimes it felt like theater, other times like a high-stakes game where failure meant death." Emotional toll and camaraderie. Despite the unusual nature of their service, soldiers formed deep bonds. Humor, music, and shared creativity helped alleviate fear. They supported one another in high-stress situations, often improvising solutions in real time under enemy observation. Letters home reflected both anxiety and pride. One soldier wrote, "We don't fire bullets, yet every day is a battle. We are painters, engineers, and dreamers in the middle of a war, and somehow it works." Post-war transition. After Germany's surrender in May 1945, the Ghost Army returned home. Many faced the challenge of transitioning from soldiers to civilians. Their skills, artistry, problem-solving, collaboration under pressure proved invaluable in civilian careers. Some veterans became professional artists and sculptors, sound engineers in film and theater, designers and architects, educators passing on lessons learned from wartime innovation. Despite the lack of immediate recognition, veterans carried pride in knowing they had saved lives and shaped history through creativity. Legacy in popular culture. Over time, the Ghost Army's story inspired books, documentaries, and museum exhibits. Highlights include PBS and Smithsonian documentaries featuring declassified operations, books detailing first-hand accounts of soldiers' experiences, museum displays featuring inflatable tanks, dummy artillery, and sound equipment. Audiences are captivated not just by the ingenuity of the Ghost Army, but by the human element, young artists facing danger with imagination and courage, proving that heroism can take unexpected forms. Epilogue: The lasting legacy of the Ghost Army. As the guns fell silent in Europe and victory was declared in May 1945, the men of the Ghost Army returned home quietly. Unlike conventional heroes, they did not march in parades or appear in headlines. Their victories were invisible. Their battles fought with creativity, deception, and courage, leaving an indelible mark on history, hidden from the world for decades. Reflection on their impact. The Ghost Army's missions had tangible and far-reaching effects. Thousands of soldiers' lives were saved by diverting enemy forces from real battle lines. Major Allied operations, including the liberation of France and the crossing into Germany, were made safer and more efficient through deception. Entire campaigns were shortened due to the enemy's miscalculations, reducing the human and material cost of the war. Historian Rick Bayer noted, "The Ghost Army did what few armies could. They waged war without firing a shot, yet changed the outcome of battles. Their creativity became a weapon, their imagination a shield." The human story. Beyond strategic impact, the Ghost Army was a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. Young men trained in painting, music, and design had been thrust into a deadly theater of war, yet found ways to survive, improvise, and make a difference. Letters, diaries, and oral histories reveal their experiences. Fear mixed with exhilaration as decoys were deployed near enemy lines. Joy and humor amidst tense operations to keep morale high. Pride in knowing that imagination could save lives and alter history. Private Jack Day reflected decades later, "I didn't hold a gun in combat, but every brushstroke, every speaker we placed, saved lives. We fought with art, and in doing so, we became part of something far greater than ourselves." Modern recognition. Though initially classified, the Ghost Army has now received widespread acknowledgement. Exhibits at museums like the National World War II Museum and the Smithsonian honor their work. Books, documentaries, and films highlight the unique blend of artistry and military strategy. The Ghost Army Legacy Project preserves their stories, ensuring future generations understand the power of creativity in warfare. Their story continues to inspire, reminding us that heroism comes in many forms. Courage is not only measured by bullets fired or battles won, it is also measured by ingenuity, resourcefulness, and the willingness to act in unexpected ways under extreme pressure. Lessons for the future. the Ghost Army's legacy extends beyond history into lessons for modern military operations, psychology, and even creative problem-solving in civilian life. Innovation under pressure. Creative thinking can overcome seemingly impossible challenges. Collaboration across disciplines. Artists, engineers, and strategists working together can achieve extraordinary results. Psychological insight. Understanding perception and human behavior can be as powerful as physical force. Closing thoughts. The men of the Ghost Army remind us that history is not always written by the loudest guns or the largest armies. Sometimes it is written by those who dare to think differently, act boldly, and believe in the power of imagination. Through inflatable tanks, recorded sounds, and painted decoys, these artists turned soldiers, fooled an enemy, saved lives, and helped win a world war. Their story is a testament to the intersection of art, strategy, and courage, proving that heroism can take many extraordinary forms. And so, the Ghost Army remains immortal, not because of explosions or gunfire, but because of the lives they preserved, the battles they influenced, and the creative genius they wielded when it mattered most. The Ghost Army, fighting with imagination, saving lives without a single shot, and forever changing the way we understand courage and ingenuity. Discover the unbelievable true story of artists who fooled the Nazis. Subscribe and follow now to uncover history like never before.